I never know exactly how to start these interview videos, but if you notice with the logo behind me, I've invited Roman Hartung, also known as Derbauer, on to talk about his YouTube channel, his overclocking exploits, and also some of the stuff he's doing with his companies, about the current state of overclocking, about the current state of hardware, what's coming in the future, and what kind of long term is in store for Roman. What's your minimum specification? Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming on to the channel. I know we've had our differences in the past, but I'm glad to say they're both behind us.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
But so, Roman, it's I've known you, I guess, on and off for a decade. In that time, you've been an overclocker, an influencer, sales and marketing for Case King. You now own HWBot, the overclocking website. You know, it's how would you describe yourself?
Doing more than I should. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you said, I started with overclocking, and that's also, I guess, how we met the first time. I'm not sure if that was like during something like MOA or must have been one
Gigabyte
of
Go
these.
OC or
Yes, one of those events for sure. So that's yeah, that's more than 10 years ago, I think. Um, but yeah, in the meanwhile, I mean, I somehow made it from the overclocking thing to at the same time starting Thermal Grizzly as well, which is now eating up most of my time actually. And
oh
then
wow.
yeah, HWBot came in last year because we've at a certain point heard from the internal team from HWBot that they had some like financial issues, and they were thinking of selling the platform to an hardware vendor. So they were reaching out to like
Mm.
G-Skill and Asus and MSI, and you know how things are. I mean, if you give like a neutral platform to a vendor, then might as well just directly stop it, right?
Yeah,
So
no, well, I mean, they were the main advertisers, weren't they, for HWBot
yes,
anyway? So,
yeah. But we were quite concerned. So I talked to my business partner, who I'm also running Thermal Grizzly with, and then we kind of jumped in and acquired the website. It was never a goal to turn this into something that makes financial sense
mm.
in some way, but it's more to give something back to the community. Yeah.
It always felt like a community driven project that somehow got twisted in with financials because obviously some money is needed at some level, right?
Yeah, I mean, I also underestimated how much money you need running this website. The like the pure hosting cost and everything is not that much. That's maybe like 800 euro per month. That's something you can easily cover with easy advertising. But then this website is pretty fragile. And there, I don't know. Even after this time, there are still bugs in the backlog that are like 8 years old. And
Yep.
paying a
I,
coder. Sorry.
I probably filed some of those.
Yeah, and yeah, taking care of that, we had to hire a coder who's working pretty much full time on this, and that is eating up a lot of the costs. It's basically, I mean, it's even now, so all the income just goes straight to the coder, but that's fine to us.
I can't imagine what that would have been like, 10 years ago if things like Patreon had existed, right?
Yeah, that's
It'd be
true.
a really community driven in that sense.
Yeah, I remember that
But
Frederick back then had issues, for example, with storage. And then on the forums, he was asking for that, like, if there are 10 people who can together buy some HDDs for the HWBot server. So, yeah, that
yeah,
was a pure community project. Yeah.
I mean, so let's go way back.
Hmm.
So we've just been speaking about overclocking, about HW, but what got you into that stuff in the first place?
That's also a quite strange thing. So, for me, everything started in like 2003 and 2004. That's when I've had like very strong interest in getting a very good gaming PC. Didn't have much money at that time, and then started to save up money for like 1.5 years, and did some like very small jobs. Yeah, I mean, I was still attending school, right? But then eventually, after saving up money for a long time, I could finally afford my it was the 7800 GT eventually. And then once I got it, I figured out 3D Mark '05, and I just watched it, and I thought this is pretty awesome. I just liked how it looked like and everything, and then I got this number at the end, and it somehow it got me hooked on this, and I wanted to increase the number, which was just it didn't make sense. But then in the end, I saved up so much time and money to buy this PC, and then didn't use it for gaming, just to increase numbers. And then at that point, I somehow discovered HWBot, and yeah. Then it goes from air cooling to water cooling. Then you're like, oh, I have to open the window in the winter to make this a bit colder. And then you start with dry ice, liquid nitrogen. I guess that's how it goes. Yeah.
My own story is practically exactly that, except replace 3D Mark 05 with Aquamark, because that was the only benchmark I
Yeah.
found. But are there any? So I know we've both been to events over the years, and some vendors. I know you go help some of their vendors when they have their own overclocking events or overclocking focus. We've just had the launch of Alder Lake, and every company under the sun has had like a secret OC day, trying to get world records. But are there any particular events or scores that you're most proud of?
I think that was maybe 4 years ago. I'm not quite sure if it was 3 or 4 years, but with KB Lake X, we did an overclocking event together with ASUS, and did Liquid Helium live event on the evening of the first day of Computex. And this took so much preparation. I think I spent 3 or 4 weeks in Taipei just for like preparation and everything, and then you're testing everything on liquid nitrogen, and then you're doing some like trial runs with liquid helium. But like a liquid helium trial run is easily like $5,000 just one shot, because it's so expensive. And then I mean, they had high expectations that we're delivering on stage, so there was a huge pressure on us, but it actually worked out, and it was still up to date. It was one of the best Intel submissions when it comes to like pure frequency. It was something like 7.5 gigahertz, if I remember correctly. But just because of all the pressure involved and everything, and that it actually worked out in the end, that made me very happy. Yeah.
It's I can't remember who said this, but I remember somebody saying at one point, with liquid nitrogen, you're spending about 8 hours of prep for every hour of benching. With liquid helium, up to about 40,
Yeah.
maybe 50. So
Yeah.
explain to people why liquid helium is such a more difficult proposition when it comes to overclocking. Why aren't we all using liquid helium? Why are overclockers still on nitrogen?
I mean, there are several aspects about liquid helium why it actually shouldn't be used. One is the fact that it's a limited resource. I mean, nitrogen is just everywhere in the ambient air, so just using liquid helium is already something that could and maybe should be discussed. But just from the technical perspective, it's quite difficult because you're entering a region you just have no clue about. It's very easy to just use your CPU at minus 190 degrees Celsius and see how it behaves, because you have so much liquid nitrogen and you can just redo it over and over and over again. But if you know that you only can spend 15 minutes on liquid helium, and then you're cooling down to minus 220, but you have no idea what's going on, because it could be that, I don't know, that the like thermal stress inside your PCB is so high that it's causing some issues inside the socket. You can easily lose the contact between your socket pins and the PCB substrate, because everything is like under very high thermal stress. The thermal paste is a huge problem as well, and there's so many things that go in place that, yeah, from my experience, it's like a typically like 1/3 chance that everything goes well, but 2/3 that something goes terribly wrong. And you're always tempted to use higher voltages than you're usually using, because you're
Yep.
going down, and then higher risk of like killing your part. Yeah, liquid helium is fun because it's giving you a lot of adrenaline, but it's also a lot of stress. Yeah.
And it's not just the vendor over your shoulder who's funding the whole thing,
Yeah.
saying we need results.
Yeah. I mean, they're one of those tanks are, as I said, it's like 10, maybe $15,000. So they definitely
Yeah.
expect something. Yeah.
Are there any sort of mentors or legends in that space you have fond memories of working with?
I mean, one of my biggest idols, I would call it, is still Kingpin. Even though some might think this is quite weird, because we're somehow similar in what we're doing. But back then, before I really started, he was already a big thing, and I remember that he was doing this impressive spot with EVGA where he was breaking. I think it was with E8600 or something like this. Cannot remember which generation of CPUs it was exactly, but it was an Enforce mainboard, and they were shooting this like advertising where, I don't know, you're bringing up your 40,000 liter LN2 tank and you're spending so much hours on breaking the record, and then it shows in the end like, but actually breaking the record priceless. And this stayed
Yeah.
in my head, and it was an amazing spot. And he did a lot of great work. He was a pioneer in a lot of things, also like creating the liquid nitrogen containers. So yeah, he's someone I definitely looked up to a lot back then. Still respect him very much. Yeah.
And still going strong at EVGA.
Yeah. It's amazing that he's also keeping doing that for such a long time, because most of the people that somehow achieved a lot and were active for certain time periods, at a certain time they're also stopping. I mean, I'm doing the same. I'm just doing this like for videos now, but I'm not actively participating in like rankings anymore because it's so time consuming and stressing that and he's still doing that, so it's quite amazing. Yeah.
You're also CEO of the organization that runs the leagues. I think there might.
Yeah, that's also a thing why I had no issue taking over HWBot, because I was also not participating anymore. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to participate anymore at all, because it's always straight like an conflict of interest.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Makes
I
sense.
uploaded a 12900K result for fun. It was just like a 7.1 gigahertz validation. But yeah, I'm not going to really participate anymore.
So, do you think the reasons for people going into that sort of competitive overclocking today would be the same as what they were for you almost 2 decades ago now?
I'm not sure. I would say maybe 50%, but back then it was. I think it was quite uncommon to do that, and it was not that you were doing this to. Sometimes I have the impression that some people are doing this to like get samples and everything. That's a typical thing in the scene, that a lot of people are participating and then they're expecting to get a ton of hardware samples in return and stuff. So I think this is like a negative thing that definitely increased and was not something that you're thinking about when you started, like, I don't know, 2005, because back then you typically didn't get a huge amount of samples. So that's something that changed. But I guess overall the people who are doing that are the same type of people like back then.
So, I mean, building that to a wider scope, what's your opinion on sponsored overclockers? Because I know there was an issue perhaps a decade ago of should we split, company
Yeah.
sponsored overclockers out from just the ones doing it in their home? And tying into that, what's kind of your vision for HWBot for that competitive overclocking scene now that you have been in essentially control of it for a year now?
Yeah, so I mean, my like ideal dream would be that we somehow ban the manufacturers from participating. Um,
That's never going to happen.
Yeah, I know that's the big thing, because if you officially ban, let's say, I don't know, the Safe Disk, who's working for ASUS, or Elmore is not working for ASUS anymore, but the direct vendor accounts, if you would stop them from participating, then they would
The
just.
McShees, the high cookies.
Yeah, exactly. Then they would just send their like golden samples to any random other guy, and he would do the result. So I guess it wouldn't really change anything. But in an ideal world, I would somehow stop that. Everything is about binning and sampling, but it's also pretty much difficult and impossible to do that. Um, might also work on changing how the ranking works itself in general. because it's so complex right now that if somebody new wants to start in this, they have no idea what they're even starting with. There are, I don't know how many hundreds and thousands of categories, so we might make that a little bit more simple for the future. For example, the global points, we might only have three rankings for that, so like an entrance, mid-level, and high-end, something like that, or like low-end and high-end and server, for example, just splitting this up to make it a little bit more simple. Because right now I don't see that we still have to divide everything in like 8 core, 10 core, 12 core, 16, 18. It's, yeah, it's just extremely complex. And but I'm not sure what to do exactly, because I also know that the community is very sensitive. If you come up with any kind of change,
They
it's
hate it.
always difficult. Yeah, it's always difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I do get what you're saying. I remember times where I would end up with a server that I was reviewing, and I just so happened that it was one of these obscure 15 core CPUs, and I could get all the global points for 15 core, for 30 core, for 45 core, for 60 core, because nobody competed in those rankings. No, I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so changing tack to some more sort of your influencer YouTube type content. I mean, AMD and Intel, they're now back at each other's throats again. Lots of opportunities, lots of interesting content. Um, so my question to you is, what do you use day to day? And I won't accept a Mac as an answer.
No, I'm using this PC right here day to day, and it's using one of those Xeon 3175X CPUs, those ridiculously expensive, overclockable 28 cores. But I always used to be a person to have those strange configurations. Back then, I had Intel Skull Trail, I had the AMD FX Quadfather. Do you remember that? Um,
I'm still looking for one on eBay.
I actually have three of them, so if you want one, I'm happy to send
Oh,
one over. We
we'll
can do
get
that
that sorted.
afterwards.
Yeah.
So I was always the type of person for those strange and unique systems. That's why I basically had it, and also because I'm using this for rendering all my videos. That's why I'm pretty happy with how it performs. But since I'm also gaming on this, I can sometimes feel that this machine is not the perfect solution for gaming. Yeah.
Well, you're using Skylake cores at what, 3.2 gigahertz space?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So multi-threading is fine, but single core applications are not that great.
So you heard it here from Roman. A $3,000 CPU doesn't perform well in games.
Yeah, sorry to say
Yeah.
that, but tried it too many times.
So, how skeptical were you that AMD would return to competitiveness?
Honestly, if you would have asked me, like actually the year before, I remember I did an interview. The year before they launched the first Zen generation, I did an interview and I said that I have no faith that AMD would ever come back. I always said that Intel was so huge at that time, and they were making so much money, and I thought they would like wisely invest this money maybe to like process their manufacturing and everything to be still ahead. I thought that AMD would not be able to catch up. I completely lost faith about that, and I'm very happy that they made it back. It's I think it's one of the best things that happened to our industry in the last decade, probably. Um, because otherwise, we would, I don't know, we would still be stuck with probably 6 cores on desktop, and we would still pay $1,000 for a 6 core CPU. So yeah.
That cheap, eh? So, what are you finding more interesting these days about the industry itself? Is it the end use case? Is it the technology behind it all? Is it the manufacturing? Is it the people? Is it, as
um,
you'd say, the corporate level?
yeah, for me, it's still the end product itself, and it's also the manufacturing on the fact that it's pretty amazing. If I think back 15 years ago, or like 10 to 15 years ago when I was studying, um, people, some of the people there who were educating us, like professors and everything, they were skeptical about yeah, they didn't know that things could be manufactured this way. They said, or some of them said, that this is impossible to make, and now we have this in our personal computer. So
Yeah.
this is just amazing that some of they always find a way to make things even tinier. And sometimes when we're doing those SEM videos and die shot videos, it's just purely insane that this is even possible to make. It's, to me, it's still, even though this was part of my studies, this is still witchcraft to me, really. Yeah.
So in that light, what aspect of the industry do you wish we had more information about? Because I mean, companies kind of restrict exactly what they want people to know.
Yeah, they are restricting. I mean, they're always running the marketing game, and that's something that's sometimes a bit annoying. So, because if you try to dig deeper and try to find out more about I don't know, anything that is manufacturing and development related, is pretty much impossible to get information on. And sometimes, if you get information on, there is no way you can disclose it. So that is sometimes a thing where I would wish the companies would be more open on, because I know that a ton of people are interested in how do things work. And even if they would show processes from, I don't know, Skylake, or even if it was earlier generations, Nihalem or whatever, the people would still, they would happily eat up all this information. And I think this would also benefit the companies if they would be more open and show a bit more about the technology itself. Doesn't have to be the most latest one. That's what I usually don't understand. But I guess I would wish that companies would be more open in the development and manufacturing aspects.
So, kind of orthogonal to that, is there any aspect of the industry that you think people should pay more attention to?
They should be more skeptical about the marketing in general. I think the marketing over the last 3 or 4 years somehow got a bit weird. It kind of also started with AMD coming back, because they saw and they noticed that there was a big hole in the marketing game. Like, Intel didn't really do anything, and then they started working with the community and everything, built up, yeah, a good reputation marketing wise, and people started to believe basically everything. And
Right,
that's, and at that point also, the AMD, I know people hate me for saying that, but the AMD fanboy train started then. And
right,
you can also feel that now, that if you're doing something about 1200K, for example, then there are still a lot of people who are just on a personal level, just feeling wise, skeptical about a product, even though technically it's fine. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to, I don't know, they're very very emotional over hardware, which is something they shouldn't be. And it's just follow what's best. But yeah, that's sometimes a bit weird, and I wish they could separate more their feelings from the real world.
it's, I mean, to be honest on that, I've thought a lot about that, and I think it's the case of they've put, say, three, four, $500 into a product
Hmm.
that on that, when they learned about it, they learned that was the best, or that was the right for them, or it came in at the right price. If you suddenly tell them that something else is better, that's essentially the same as telling them that they're an idiot for buying what they've bought,
That's a very
and they
good
don't
thought.
like being called an idiot. So
Yeah,
it's kind of that psychology. So they have to defend the fact that they purchased it.
yeah,
I don't
that's a
know.
very good point. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Whereas, you and I, we get a certain amount because we get to test through working with these companies. We don't necessarily have that uh, unconscious bias, I guess, because we're ultimately not spending our own money. And I know people hate me saying that. The stuff that we take from these companies is still owned by the companies. Make no mistake,
Yeah.
they can recall it.
How is it for you? I mean, for me, people still, for whatever reason, think that I'm tied very much to Intel. Do you also have this, that the people have this, like, this vision about what companies you're affiliated to, or something like that?
And the interviewee becomes the interviewer. No, but you're right. So at one point, Anand had a 6-month sponsorship with AMD. This is pre-Ryzen. It was AMD Center. We had a big red banner at the top, and it had all the recent AMD news and links. And people still say, "Oh, you're a shill for AMD." But
Hmm.
conversely, they'll this year, I would say, on the CPU side at least, pretty much all the news and reviews and stuff has been on the Intel side. So now they're saying, well, you're not. spending enough time on the AMD stuff, so you're an Intel shill. And I reckon I take the BBC outlook when it comes to say like politics. If you get equal amount of complaints from both sides, you're doing it right.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, yeah. I think I get more complaints for being an interracial, but that's also I think historically because I was doing a lot of critical content about like Threadripper back then, and
Hmm.
also the AMD boost topic. Even though I had very like I only had pure intentions for that because the
Yeah.
only intention for me was just fix it so the people have the right performance, the right boost. That was my only intention. And then people somehow think that I'm for whatever reason trying to like bash the company, but what's the point? Yeah, I don't have any of
It's
I don't have any stocks, so it wouldn't benefit me.
I mean, me neither. Just to clarify, because I know some people think I do. But yeah, no, it's we had kind of that sort of 8 to 10 years of mainly focusing on the Intel side because I mean, from the overclocking perspective, that was you just used Intel because if you wanted good GPU results, they had the best single core performance for so long. So when AMD comes along, you have to relook at it with a skeptical eye, but subconsciously you're still thinking kind of in the Intel mindset. And it's taken a few years, I think, for us all to adjust into having those compartmentalized. I'm not sure if you agree with that or
Yeah, I caught myself several times when the Ryzen CPUs came out that I had the subjective feeling that Intel felt better. It felt more
yeah.
I don't know, not better is maybe the wrong word, but I used to have it so many years, and I was just using this all the time that AMD somehow felt strange or unknown, and just felt more familiar with Intel. But yeah, that's I don't know 3 years ago. So
It's I've always been an advocate for double blind testing, but
mhm.
when you're an individual working from home trying to test this stuff, you know what you're testing.
Yeah,
There's
but
no way there's no
that's also something I find quite difficult actually because sometimes it's just me doing the stuff and I'm just a single person, and if I make a mistake I might not know, I might not see it,
yeah.
and then you have like 1,000 or several thousand people watching this, they will know and they will let you know.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're just doing a mistake because you just I don't know didn't pay enough attention or whatever the reason was, but yeah, it's sometimes you're just doing mistakes because you're a single guy. It's not like you're double checking with 10
Yeah.
people before you're publishing, right?
I mean, even with a big publisher, to a certain extent, you still are one person.
Yeah.
And with video, it's always harder to correct yourself than it is a written
I
article.
mean, once it's online, yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, pivoting to on the GPU side, talking about having that Intel mindset when AMD came with their new Zen processors, are we going to have like an Nvidia mindset when Intel releases their discrete graphics? Do you have high hopes for Intel here?
I actually have high hopes. Yeah, I actually already saw it once in person. I couldn't test the performance yeah, unfortunately. But I have high hopes because Intel has their own manufacturing, which means that they are not as tied to I don't know TSMC or Samsung and their issues when it comes to maybe availability. And even if they're not able to keep up with the performance directly with Nvidia and AMD, I guess it's very healthy for us for the total community to have a third supplier because right now at a point where nothing is really available. And if they hit something like 3070 performance or maybe 3080 performance, then that is something that would be absolutely great to have. And especially if they can provide better availability and maybe better pricing, I guess the entire community would definitely benefit from this.
So when you get one of these new GPUs in your hands, what are you going to be looking for? When it comes to both generating content and just for your own personal edification.
For me personally, I will look for the entire package. Like, how does the product look like? What kind of message do they want to transport? How will they approach the marketing? How will the design look like? I think they will try to go their own way. At least I hope so. And I will just try to see if they're trying to directly battle like maybe Nvidia directly or AMD directly, or if they're just approaching their very own way, which is something I hope. It's better to do your own thing than reacting on the competition. And yeah, from the product itself, my first personal goal is actually just maybe to have the first water cooler available for
Oh, right.
for this. Yeah, that's something we're working actually on for Thermal Grizzly. That's something we actually didn't disclose yet, but uh, we set up our own factory in Germany to start with manufacturing water cooling stuff. So that's something we might see in the future soon. And those GPUs could be the first product actually. We will see.
That'd be interesting. Depends on exact launches, because I think it's still still a bit questionable.
Yeah, I think they
Um,
delayed it to February or something like that.
yeah. So I mean, so what does Intel have to do to succeed?
To succeed, I guess, just have a product that's reliable and have a decent price point at a decent performance. It doesn't have to be the best performance because that's something nowadays that I guess doesn't matter that much at this point where the availability is so bad and the pricing is so high. If you have a decent product available that's performing well at a decent price, then they can. This is probably the easiest time for them to enter the market because otherwise if it was like 3 4 years ago where there was better availability and tougher pricing, it's much more difficult. But now with their own manufacturing, I guess it's easier for them to enter the market.
Um, will you be looking at overclocking performance?
Yeah,
I'm
I already
undercold.
yeah, I already asked them about that because I was afraid that Intel is doing the Intel thing and locks everything up. But from what I heard, they are very open to making those cards very open. So they want to also like directly work with overclockers and advertise overclocking. I hope they're not going the Nvidia way because Nvidia, you know it, they basically blocked everything. You cannot flash BIOS on several cards and cannot really do anything on the cards. But apparently, Intel is willing to do a lot overclocking wise on those cards, which makes me very happy. So that they're open. It's basically the same like the AMD thing back then when they were entering the market with the Zen. It's always good if you're not the market leader, then you're maybe open to new things.
You might have to buy the K SKU to get the overclocking.
That's a good question.
It's it's I'm actually planning to spend some time with Mr. Dan Ragland, who heads up the OC team in
That's awesome.
Portland sometime soon. I'm going to get him on for an interview as well. I wonder what he'll tell me on the record versus off the record. That's
Yeah,
going to be a fun.
Dan is an awesome person. I visited them in person in 2017. They gave me a tour during through their OC lab and everything. It's amazing that the guys in there are just pure enthusiasts, and same as Dan. He's just living the dream. I think he's the perfect guy for that job and a very good person. Yeah.
It's I like the fact that they're rolling Dan out for more media events now. He's definitely getting his camera legs
Yeah, it's
soon.
also
So
because you know you're talking to a guy who actually has a very good amount of knowledge. Like he knows everything you're asking because you know how it works if you're just talking to a marketing person. No offense, but most of the time they're just they will go to Dan and ask Dan, "Hey, can
yeah.
you explain this to me?" And then getting back to you, but only give you 50% of the information because the other 50% they might not have understood or understand. So that's why talking to Dan directly is perfect there.
So I mean, with respect to that, Intel has a dedicated team just purely for overclocking, deciding what features to create, how to open things up. But at the same time, they've just had several generations of products that have had no headroom, no
That's true.
real serious headroom.
Yeah.
Where do where do you think Intel goes from here? Because everybody's trying to find the best way to push the silicon to the max out of the box, which leads nothing to, I guess, some of your other ventures like
Yeah,
HWBot if there's no room.
I had a discussion with that about that topic with Intel as well, and they basically told me that their internal goal was to make those CPU as no as similar as possible. So they were trying to make their manufacturing very even to
Right.
eliminate any kind of like tolerances and impacts on the CPU. Even though that's something we liked, because we had CPUs that were terrible, but we also had CPUs that were extremely good, and everything in between. But their goal was to have just good CPUs, just all of them, have
Yeah.
them good, but not have anything that's great, but also not have something that is extremely terrible. That's I guess I can understand it from the Intel point of view, but it also makes our life very boring. They also
It's
know they also know our voices, that we think it's boring, and I'm not sure if they're going to change that, but yeah, never lose hope.
well, hey, they gave you an overclocked 28 core to play with,
Yeah,
an
I hope
unlocked
that
28 core. Yeah.
yeah, I hope they will make that for the next HEDT platform as well. We'll see.
It's it's funny you talk about, the sort of high frequency, low frequency, basically, spreading out that distribution. Because I remember back in the day, people like Andre Yang, who had family
Oh,
money, would
shit.
buy 500 CPUs to get the best one.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, he
remember
he
that.
still he still holds the global frequency world record, doesn't he?
Yeah, but yeah, it just shows that in the end, it is a money game. That's true. Yeah, I mean, if you can spend a limited amount of money on CPUs and bin them, then it's more likely that you will find the best one. Definitely, yeah.
So, as a side question to that, I also had in my notes, I wanted to. I'm more focused on the CPU side of the industry. I think that's pretty much obvious to the audience. But when it comes to GPUs, how are GPUs different when it comes to extreme overclocking?
They are different. I mean, I guess that the biggest difference is that there is no socket on there. That is the most annoying part. I mean, if GPUs were socketed, that would be amazing, because in the end, it's like you can imagine it as having a main board with your CPU in there and your memory sticks in there, and there's nothing you can change. Yeah, in an ideal world, we would be able to change like the memory chips on the PCB, and also swap out the GPU maybe, because you have different PCBs which are essentially like different main boards, different, I don't know, power supplies, different VRM configurations, and that makes the GPU overclocking so much more different and more difficult, because there are more like binning factors in there when it just comes to the pure hardware aspects. And then it's more difficult in general, because the GPUs from the power consumption level are so much higher, especially if you extreme overclock them. We measured 780 Ti's back then that had peaks much over 2000 watt. The highest peak we measured back then was 2800 watt on a 780 Ti. We had to use two power supplies, just like two 2000 watt power supplies, just for the GPU itself,
Just for
and
one.
just for one.
So
Yeah,
four-way SLI was out of the question.
yeah, and that is we were running four-way SLI with 5 PSUs. That is because you use one PSU for the mainboard and the CPU, and one very strong PSU for each GPU. And that's making in general GPU overclocking extremely difficult. Also because you have the GPU that has the, I mean, it's made of silicon, and you directly contact the silicon to your liquid nitrogen container. And due to the fact that both of those materials have different thermal expansion rates, then you always have this thermal paste cracking issue, and that's very present on the GPUs due to the fact of this very high load. If the GPU suddenly goes from, I don't know, 50 watt power consumption to 2000 watt, then the thermal expansion rate is so high that simply the thermal paste loses contact to the surface area, and then you have problems. And that's what's called cracking in the scene. There's nothing you can do about that, and yeah, that's often very annoying. Yeah.
It's I think in those situations, it's often best if you have um, a person on hand to manage the temperatures of one or two pots each. So if you've
Yes.
got 5 pots going, you need at least 3 people just on the nitrogen, then one on the operating system,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
hope somebody's actually configured Windows properly.
Yeah, that's also one of those typical things. So you set up everything, you cool down, and you're running four-way SLI, and you're just about to start the benchmark, or you actually ran the benchmark, and then your performance is complete crap because something at Windows, I don't know, went terribly wrong, and then then sometimes the ice builds up inside the slot, and then some card goes from X16 PCIe to X4, and then you have to stop everything. And that's, yeah, I did a lot of four-way SLI back then, and I'm happy that I don't have to do it anymore. Yeah.
I remember doing benching with some of the UK guys, and there was one guy who had stacks of hard drives because this is before the sort of SSD revolution. And he said each one of these has an image of my OS. If I blue screen on a hard drive, I take it out and I put another one in because that Windows image is now balked and dead. You'll never get a good score on that image again. It's only ever the first run on an image that does the best.
Yeah, that's very, very typical. Yeah, if you don't prepare in that way, and you're running four-way SLI and your OS is done, then good job.
Will we ever get a situation where we have like a CPU or a GPU that can overclock 100%?
I don't think so. I guess, I mean, we actually had that. Was it the E2140 or something like that?
Yeah.
Back then, socket 775. There were some CPUs that had very high overclocking potential, but now you know that. I mean, the companies will try everything to deliver the best performance themselves already. So the headroom is getting more and more limited. I don't think we will see that. Yeah.
So big picture type stuff. What's the future look like for you?
You mean on a technical level or the personal level?
Either. This is the interview question. It's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
uh, Probably not doing much anymore of what I'm doing now. The thing is, even though I love doing what I'm doing, I've been doing this for so long that I can actually feel that there are some days where it's so exhausting, that you cannot do this for so long. I mean, you know it yourself now that you're also doing YouTube stuff. If you're doing that for a very long time period, it's extremely exhausting because you have to deliver. You always have to constantly deliver. It's not like I can randomly take 4 weeks off. Then there will be 4 weeks of no content unless I like produce a lot of content up front, which is usually not really possible in our world because then the content is already old. So uh, yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, but I know that at a certain point I have to slow down a bit. Yeah.
Have you ever felt the pull of a vendor job offer or anything?
I had so many of these offers, but I would never take any of these. Especially Asus 2018, 2017. They gave me a lot of job offers to work at HQ for mainboard R&D department for liquid nitrogen overclocking, for example. Basically what SafeDisk is doing now, for example. But yeah, I cannot imagine doing this on a daily basis because overclocking, it used to be a hobby for me. And then doing the competitive overclocking, it became more frustrating at a certain point because
Yeah.
you're expected to deliver always. And doing this as a job is probably even worse because then for launch, for example, you have your boss sitting in your neck expecting you to deliver, I don't know, the 7.5 gigahertz or the artificial 8 gigahertz, I don't know. And then yeah, that's something I probably wouldn't enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you need to do. Just hex edit CPU Z.
I often talked, Splave Alan.
Yep.
I often talk with him, and he said that we should do a video about the crystal modding. I'm not sure if you remember this, but
Yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
years ago, somebody did a crystal mod on the main board to achieve clocks that are not possible.
You
So
you,
yeah,
you replace a 33 megahertz crystal with a 50 megahertz crystal and
yeah,
get
exactly,
a
yeah.
50% overclock that way. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's so okay. So if you weren't doing this mix of thermal grizzly, YouTube, overclocking, um, what else would you be doing? Would it still be something engineering related, or are we talking musician or footballer or sort of stuff?
No, I think actually everything I'm doing is also still my hobby because everything I'm doing is because I'm enjoying it. But the stuff I enjoyed the most was like working, developing stuff, developing own products, working on CNC machines, for example, and like just the pure engineering thing, like engineering, water cooling stuff, maybe then. Also, not not that much being into in the public, even though it's mostly fun. There are also aspects about this that are not fun about being in public, and yeah, I might trade that at a certain point.
Fast forward 20 years and we see you and other tech YouTubers all in sort of like an AA meeting describing PTSD from being in a
Yeah,
public light.
I know so many other YouTubers, not also from the tech scene, but just general. Most of them are like German YouTubers. There are so many that really have like I don't know, issues after a certain time being in there, because the pressure in there is so high, and people always, or outside people still have this impression that, yeah, you're just shooting 15 minutes videos, and what's the big
Yeah.
deal? But they don't see that there is this huge pressure, and they never felt this probably, and also that's also an issue for me because I take everything pretty personal. And if there are like negative comments on YouTube, even though I know that you shouldn't take this very personal. For me, every single comment, that's why I'm also reading, I would say 99% of the comments on my channel, I'm reading all of them. And in my head, it's always a person sitting on his keyboard and actually posting this comment. And I'm always thinking, like, who's that guy? And what was going through his mind at the point when he was writing that comment? And it's always something that's in my head, and that's making it a bit difficult sometimes. Yeah.
I think that kind of feeling never really goes away, even with years of therapy. Um, but one could argue if you have time to read 99% of your comments, you're not producing enough content. So time to
that
crack the whip.
that is a very good aspect. But I think that's actually very true. You can just ignore it and move on and make more content. But for me, it was always important to never lose the connection to the community. I'm also replying to
Mhm.
a lot of comments, because I think that's also because I'm always appreciating and really thinking about that. If there is a comment, that's a person who wrote the comment. And I think as a YouTuber, it's very important to never forget about that aspect, that those people who are sitting at home writing those comments and watching the videos, they gave me the opportunity to sit here and have this like 3,000 dollar CPU in my rig. Those people are responsible for that, and
Yeah.
that's something you shouldn't forget. Yeah.
It's on the written side of things, it's a little bit different because an Antec was always meant to be geared towards engineers more than, I guess, the general consumer. You do an article, I don't know, 10, 12,000 words, and it would get 11 comments. But it's the 3 emails that you get from engineers that matter the most, right? Because
Yeah,
the engineers aren't going to be leaving the comments. But then you do a YouTube video and you get 100 comments, and
I'm not sure what's worse though, because if I would get a comment from somebody, let's say a very highly educated engineer who knows what he's talking about, and he would like criticize me heavily for doing something very wrong, that would be much worse than just reading a random comment on YouTube. So
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
It's I mean, so sometimes people disparage YouTube comments, but interesting story. In the last year or so, I had a piece that was both on an Antec and on my channel, and they both had comments, and the YouTube comments were calm and
Hmm.
measured. The Antec comments were pure vitriol, and I would have expected it the other way around.
I
That's,
can, yeah,
general perceptions and such.
I can totally feel that. That's something I also noticed for at least the Germany community. If I compare the comments on YouTube versus forum comments, let's say Hardware Lux or I don't know, Computer Base, those bigger websites, if I can compare the comments, it seems like those forum comments are much more toxic as well than the YouTube stuff. That might be related, obviously, because the comments on YouTube are usually followers for you. But also, if I look at other content creators, they experience pretty much the same. It's very strange that seems to be a different type of person who is doing those comments in forums, and for whatever reason, some of them are much more harsh, much more toxic. Yeah.
But forums communities built over time, comments can just be one shot,
Yeah.
fast
Yeah.
food type comments.
No, that is true. Yeah, but also something I would add is because I'm running a German channel and I split it up into two channel. I used to have one channel where I'm just shooting dual languages, but it was always an issue with YouTube, and they never fixed their recommendation system. It was like
Right.
an English viewer always got like the German recommendation, even though the language in the video was set to English. And eventually, we decided to split up into two channels, and I'm posting exactly the same videos, so it could be an whatever topic, but it's just translated in the end. I'm just shooting it twice. It's the same content, but the comments are totally different. It's very interesting that there's a different mindset between that's definitely between different countries. Germans, for example, they tend to be like jealous over everything. If I'm making a video about something like a very expensive piece of hardware where I'm soldering on or whatever, and I'm just enjoying this out of a purely technical aspect, then I'm getting usually a lot of like very jealous comments. It's really strange. And
Why are you destroying this 3090?
yes, yes. And in the English community, this is completely different. They're much less toxic, much less jealous for whatever reason. I guess that's the German mentality in the end. But yeah, that's also something I noticed over the years.
Yeah, it's an interesting this dichotomy with having your German channel on your English channel. Um, Not only for the commenters, but now your workload has doubled. You have to edit everything twice,
Yeah.
once in English, once in German. But from correct me if I'm wrong here, but the German tech scene is quite vibrant. If I look at the UK tech scene, we've just seen the demise of Hexus and BitTech, and
Yeah.
do you find that your the German side is more up for looking at hardware and buying and more interested in
Yes.
that sort of stuff?
Yeah. We actually see an increase, which is interesting. Some of the communities were decreasing over the years. That's why I guess Hexus also went down.
Yeah.
But at least in Germany, at a certain point, we were not sure if this is like decreasing, but it's definitely increasing. There are more and more people interested in this and in those general topics. And I'm still wondering. It's still very weird to me if I'm posting a German video and it has like 100,000 views, and it's a very very nerdy maybe video you could call it. Typically not a friend of that terminology, but um, if it's a very technical deep down video and you have 100,000 people watching this, 100,000 Germans, that is quite amazing. So yeah, for whatever reason, there is a lot of people in here enjoying this stuff. Yeah.
Maybe I should get some of my content translated into German.
That actually would be interesting, but I think that's a good thing for you because it's English content, and I guess people who are very into this. I know a lot of my followers. Also, one guy I recently hired who is working for me, doing some stuff for me in like taking care of the website. He's also watching your videos, for example. So there's a lot of Germans watching your stuff as well.
How easy or difficult are you finding it to bring on help for your various businesses? I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm thinking, do I need to hire a video editor and that sort of
Yeah,
stuff?
there are some things you can somehow manage to give it away, but for me, most of the time it's quite difficult. There are the core things you just have to do yourself.
Mm.
But for example, I mean, my girlfriend is video editing for me, so that's very helpful. So she's employed at my YouTube business. But it's also one thing for at least in the past, it was not it was not possible for me to find somebody to edit the videos, because if you just look for somebody who's working 9 to 5, then what if I'm doing a video at a weekend? What if there's something urgent? Then he will be
Yeah,
like, yeah, I can cut this on Monday. So
yeah.
that's something that's quite difficult in our world. And generally, yeah, you can maybe hire somebody to do some of the testing, but in the end, if I would hire somebody to do the testing, I would still have my doubts. I would still want to do it, see it with my own eyes. So
So I mean, This is why I've automated all my testing, or at least my benchmarking, because
Yeah.
then I can just hand my script to my intern
Yeah.
and then just see
Okay.
the results that get uploaded. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't given him any of the more complex systems yet. He's just been doing that sort of KB Lake, Skylake, Broadwell.
All right.
Seems
Okay.
okay
Okay.
so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess this, like, if it's like stock testing or just running benchmarks, that's probably fine. But also
Hmm.
that's usually not what I'm doing, because I'm not that great at these things, to be honest. Um, and that's why I rather do the content where I know that that might be a bit more special, more unique, more my type of thing, I would probably call it. And then it's not the normal testing I can just repeat over and over again, and that's why I probably have to do it myself.
Well, I mean, I've noticed from a number of the PC YouTube space that those who are focusing on reviews are seeing a decrease in viewership just because of the unavailability of everything.
Yeah.
Um, and whereas those who are more interested in learning, the channels seem to be increasing. Are you seeing something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, I mean, it's the same for you. It's amazing that your channel is now at what, like 60,000 viewers, and yours is increasing and increasing. And that's because your case is the perfect example that even in like 2020, 2021, if you have your very special niche, like your very
Mm.
special way of doing things, then you can be still very successful. Whereas if you just jump in and your goal is to just plug the 3080 in there and run 3D Mark and just present the score as a normal review, then the competition is extremely high, and they have several more years of experience ahead, and bigger community behind them, so might be easier for them. But even for those bigger ones, at least looking at, I don't know, like Paul's hardware maybe, um, I know that they had issues with like decreasing views over, especially the last year. So I think some of them might also have to find ways to make their content a bit more their own way, a bit more different. Um, yeah.
I'm not sure if you feel the same, but having a niche is great. But I'm always cognizant of the wider appeal of the content I'm producing. Can I connect this to a wider audience than would normally be interested? And sometimes that kind of does end up dumbing it down, because you could easily do a 1 hour video, but really YouTube wants the sort of 14-minute, 12-minute ones.
So from my experience, or at least for me, it was always that I was looking at a topic, and I just found it interesting for me personally, and then I made a video about it. And for whatever reason, this all often was successful or seemed to be also interesting to others. Um, but sometimes you go too deep down into the rabbit hole. Sometimes it's too much on the edge, and then you will notice that some people, they're like, "What am I watching right now?" Like,
You're the only person interested in that thing.
so that happened as well. But I guess over the years, you somehow you somehow learn how to differentiate between what's personally interesting to me and at which point am I going to lose the viewer. Um,
Yeah.
that's also something that over the years kind of gives you an image, uh, like an uh, like an image to the viewer, because sometimes you could do things much more deep down. You could do it so much more on a very specific level, but you know exactly if you're doing that, it will be either too complex for YouTube, like because you will end up with 1 hour video, or it will be too complex and you're losing 80% of the viewers, and they will be like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And sometimes you just have to find a balance between what is interesting but what would be too much. And then at a certain point, people are like, yeah, but you could do this, you could do this, and you
Yeah.
already know that you could do it, but it's not what should be on YouTube sometimes.
That's what your second channel is for. It's I can't remember who said it, but it said in a book, for every equation you put in a book, you half your readership.
Oh,
And that's
damn.
a sort of similar thing on YouTube, right? It's
I have to remember that one. Yeah,
it's
that's very true. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're coming out of the pandemic, and I'm not sure if you've started attending events, but I have, at least, from the press perspective, and people are already asking to if I'm going to CES in January. That's still up in the air. Um, how are you kind of feeling that sort of environment right now?
The thing is, the first year I actually enjoyed because after so many years of traveling too much, I think the first year was quite nice because it was like much more relaxed. Could stay more at home. So I think at that time I actually enjoyed it, even though it might sound weird, but just because it was much less stress, didn't have to attend so many events, just had it online, could easily essentially do the same content out of this. But now after almost 2 years, I guess, yeah, I'm starting to miss this as well, especially the community stuff. Uh, Gamescom is usually a big thing here in Germany. There are like hundreds of thousands of people coming over, and I used to be there 1 week just to meet people. I didn't do anything else. I usually just went to one booth and just told everyone I will be there from, I don't know, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. and just come by and talk to us. That's what I did for a
Hmm.
full week usually. And um, those events were quite awesome because that's the only way you can directly talk with the people and also get their feedback and explain a little bit more about why and how you're doing things. And so yeah, I'm missing these things, and I hope it will somehow come back. I think it will take a long time until we will be back at where we were at. I don't know, maybe 5 years even, but yeah, we'll see.
It's. I do remember seeing some people more often, some peers more often than I saw my parents in a given year, just because of all the travel.
I can absolutely relate.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's. I think I'm looking forward to it. It's just getting over those initial humps of having more tests and stuff. Um, but also, I've never done content creation for videos on the road necessarily, so that's going to be a new thing for me. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
you feel about doing that, or any experiences you'd like to
I
share.
I tried it multiple times, like once at CES and twice at Computex. It's a so-so thing. It can be really nice because there's so much content you can create in a very short time period. But then yeah, it's also a trade-off because for example, you have 2 hours at 2 hours at MSI, and then you have 2 hours at Gigabyte and 2 hours, I don't know, at Team Group, whatever. And it's only a very limited amount of time. You cannot enjoy it as much, you cannot go deep down as much. It's just pure work. You go there, you get the information, you basically repeat the information in front of your camera, you go back to your hotel room, you cut the videos, you upload it, and it's a lot of work. It's kind of cool that you can live present the stuff to your audience. The people also appreciated this a lot. The feedback I got from this was amazing, but the amount of work involved in this is insane. I didn't expect that before. Yeah, I think it was Computex 2019 for me was, I think, 6 days, and in that 6 days I slept maybe 3 hours a day. Um,
Yep, that
but
sounds normal. Yep.
yeah, and we uploaded six videos a day, and that was maybe a bit over the
Ooh,
top, but
yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. So I mean, is we're moving now into Q4, Q1. Interesting launches ahead. What's the future look for you on the content side? The immediate
Uh,
future.
yeah, I want to do more community related stuff right now. So I'm working on something which you can probably call like a hardware quiz, where I'm inviting people. It's more like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but in a hardware
Right.
way. So every level you get like hardware prizes. Um, because at a certain point I realized I'm getting so much stuff, and I don't even know what to do with this anymore. So I'm starting to gift away like mainboards and CPUs and everything, and this way I think I can somehow give something cool back to the community and also create content at the same time. That's something I want to focus more on in the future, and maybe I will do a little bit less content. Maybe do like one or two videos per week instead of doing two or three.
And I guess to finish up, right? you've been doing it a while. I've been doing this a while. But what advice would you give to those aspiring to be the next Roman Hartung?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a goal you would want to achieve. I mean, yeah, it can be definitely be cool, and but people always tend to only see the positive side of things. Of
Mm.
course, they might see that I don't know, like I drive an expensive car or whatever, and you get all the hardware you test and everything. So they often see those positive aspects, but for me, it's like I get up in the morning at maybe 10 or 11 a.m. and I work until 2 or 3 a.m. and I go to bed. And I repeat this maybe 360 days a year. I didn't take a weekend off for 1.5 years now. So it's definitely a cool life. I'm totally enjoying this because this is what I love to do. But it's not always as green as people think. There are a lot of negative aspects about this as well. But yeah, could be worse, I guess.
This is why we need travel back again, because now the 12 hours you spend going to Taipei, you can sleep on the flight.
Yeah, that's actually the time where I could watch some movies and I don't know, series and stuff. I enjoyed that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the channel. I mean, it's great that we can talk again. And for anybody watching, if you're not already subscribed to Derbauer, how do you spell Derbauer again?
Derbauer. Yeah, the German way would be Derbauer, but you can say Derbauer or whatever. Yeah, I mean, that name, that's one of the things I came up with this when I was 12 and just gaming. I didn't expect this to achieve anything. And then you're stuck with the name. That's how it goes.
That's why I transitioned just to my full name almost immediately.
That was a wise choice.
I saw that. I saw that coming. But awesome.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on.
I want to thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
Because I mean, most of our viewers might know that we had some things in the past where we might not have agreed on, and sometimes that's also something. If you're living in the online world, sometimes you just, at least for me, some of the things I did were definitely not mature. But that's what I also meant when I said it. I'm taking sometimes things more personal, and sometimes you're reading things and you're taking things in a total different way than how the other person meant it. And sometimes this just leads to, I don't know, sometimes you're just having an argument. But I'm very happy that we just talked about it and everything is fine, and very happy about that. Yeah, so thank you again.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to when we next meet up. If it's not CES, then it might be Computex. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Having a beer there.
Awesome.
Sounds like a good idea.
Good stuff. Have a good one.
You too. Have a good weekend.
If you like this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We also have now a private Discord server. And if you want access to that, become a Patreon member and it'll instantly add you as long as your emails are linked. You can join the Patreon for as little as $1.50 a month, and it all goes back into helping the channel. Thank you for your support.